Hello everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Compression Thinking series. My name is Ethan Berry and I'm joined by Robert Doc Hall, co-founder of the Compression Institute and professor emeritus at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. Doc's career started in engineering and manufacturing. His experience in these fields is what paved the way for his realization that current business models are contributing to the destruction of our planet. How do we get along without leaving too much of a mess? How do we adapt to a changing environment? Well, these are some of the questions Doc has been asking his entire career. This series is about how you can help to make a difference by making nature a stakeholder in your business or community. To do this, we need to change our values. But before we can do that, we need to change the way we think. If you enjoy this series, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Doing so helps us spread this program to more people and more communities who may benefit from the message. Now, you may be wondering what we mean when we use the word compression. Well, in the context of this podcast, compression is a reference to the squeeze we are putting on nature. To ease the compression of nature, we need to compress the way we live. Compression thinking is a guide to help us do just this, hopefully before it's too late. So how do you become a compression thinker? Well, you'll just have to keep listening to find out. Today, we're going to be talking about cleaning. So, Doc, when you were selecting topics to cover in this series, why did cleaning stand out to you as something that we needed to address?
Well, because cleaning has been addressed under the heading of scientific cleaning, but more important, everybody is involved in cleaning at least a little bit. You all got to clean up your car, your place where you work. Got to at least shovel it out enough to have a path from the door to bed when you go home. So there's a certain amount of cleaning in everybody's life. And then everybody thinks they know kind of how to clean if they do much cleaning. Maybe we don't.
Well, what's wrong with the way people normally clean, and how does scientific cleaning, answer that?
They're popular myths. One of the most dangerous is that it takes some harsh, strong chemical that stinks to get something really clean. Not true. That if a little bit of some harsh chemical works, we'll use a whole lot of it and it'll work better. Not true. And so you can use chemicals that are relatively good to just flush down the toilet or pour down the drain. They will clean very well. And the key is to get about the right concentration of them to clean well. If you don't, you leave a residual trace of the stuff, and that's not good for the cleaner. It's not good for the occupants of the building. And so the scientific part of it simply tried to look at practices and test whether there was anything to these old myths, like the old fact finder things. And this is what came out.
Well, before we dive into scientific cleaning, let's first, cover why do we clean in the first place? What is the goal of cleaning?
Well, scientific or not, the goal is to improve indoor health, mostly for people, maybe also for animals if you got dogs or cats and whatever in the house. But make it inside so that you are not making yourself sick just by the environment you live in. And most of us live in an indoor environment, 22 to 23 hours a day at least.
So when we say clean for health, what role do you think the immune system, for example, plays in this conversation?
Well, the immune system protects you from getting sick from microbes, and then you have a tolerance to various things that you may be allergic to, or even to potentially toxic substances like alcohol. And so we all are different in our immune systems, but you reduce the threat level inside a building or a car or a bus or a train or a building that's used by the public or an office. That's called the built environment, cleaning for the built environment. And you want an environment inside that does not threaten somebody's health unnecessarily.
Yeah, you're trying to do things like control the spread of contagions and things like this.
Yes. And so control the allergens and control the spread of pathogens, usually some biological critter that your immune system may not shake off.
Okay, so let's move on to scientific cleaning. First, let's explain what it is.
The name started because they began to explore these old practices with science. But I'd say the key part of more or less professional cleaning for public buildings, that's where it came from, is to educate the janitor for almost 3 weeks before they next pick up a rag. And why? Well, if they know why they're doing what they're doing, they can give performance that you can't possibly get if you consider them to be dummies. And so you have this little procedure for them to go through that they may or may not follow. And so what does that education consist of? Well, they'll talk about microbes, pathogens, particulates in the air, a little bit about immune systems and how they work, various kinds of allergens. What do you have to do to minimize the effect? Because in a public building, for offices or where just general public's coming through, people come in that have all kinds of susceptibilities, and we all have a little different immune system, different allergies, and so on. You can't have the building ideal for any one person, so you try to minimize the risk for everybody, and a key part of that is reducing the spread of pathogens.
That sounds like that program, the training program, is a lot more intensive than how janitors are usually trained. Like, what do? They show up first day on the job and someone hands them a mop and tells them to clean. That has to have a positive effect on the mental state of janitors, It's often seen as one of the lowest jobs on the hierarchy, that no one wants that job. It's one of those jobs you take because you have to. You're in a mall food court, for example, and the janitor isn't even making eye contact with anyone. He's got his head facing the ground, and he's just trying to, do his job until it's quitting time.
Oh, yes, and there's a reason for that. There are people that will actually treat janitors like dirt. They'll insult them. And so they're just trying to stay invisible. But if they've been trained and they know more about cleaning and some of these things than certainly most people do, they are transformed into a healthcare worker, public health. And cleaning is a part of public health. And so it can have a magical effect on the esteem of the janitor. They can take pride in what they're doing. And I remember asking one guy who's involved in this, he worked for a university, and what he wished the president of the university knew about cleaning that he knew. He said, I wish he knew that there are more pathogens on his telephone than there are on a toilet seat.
What's the research? Has there been any research into the efficacy of scientific cleaning?
Yes, some. Most of it's on K-12 schools where you can really measure things a little better than in some other institutions. But let's begin with a janitor. A key thing is to reduce the occupational health hazards and the accidents for janitors, and janitors rank pretty high on both of those. They're exposed to a lot of chemicals. They may be involved in lifting some heavy weights. They may slip on wet floors. All of that leads to accidents. And so at least one company, Boeing, the biggest commercial user I know of scientific cleaning, adopted the program not because they needed it cleaner than a space to build airplanes. They needed that, all right, but they wanted to reduce the accidents and improve the occupational health of janitors. And it worked.
How well is this caught on?
Depends on how you look at it. public health or scientific cleaning is spreading pretty rapidly from a small base. And for about 3 years now, the biggest adopter is the United States Post Office, 11,000 buildings nationwide. And I don't know where they are in their program. I'd guess about halfway now, because it's a difference. It's a change. And when you introduce change like that in an organization, it takes some time. You got to train the janitors, and some of them don't want to do it at first. And most of them, once they're into it, really like it. But it's like any organizational change. You've got to, take your time and introduce it so everybody understands what's going on and they can actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, how cost-effective is it, compared to other programs?
Usually the cost goes down, and the cost hawks in companies and other institutions like that part of it, you may not reduce the total amount of labor by very much. What you do reduce is the total number of cleaners. You standardize. So standardized equipment, get the best, standardize on it, reduce the total number of cleaners used, get rid of the harsh ones, and maybe you only have a dozen, 20 or so at the most, cleaning agents that are used, and only 3 or 4 that are used regularly every day. That alone can improve the productivity of the janitor, and I know the University of Texas has the system, and they cleaned out a whole building full of excess chemicals and equipment and parts for equipment just doing this. I don't know how big the building was, but pretty good-sized building, and of course the University of Texas is a big, big place.
Why hasn't everyone jumped on board for this? It kind of seems like a no-brainer to me.
Well, when you talk about it the way we are, it does sound like a no-brainer, but business models tend to work against this. Number one, it's not recognizing that cleaning is a beneficial thing to do for the organization, and the benefits that you get would exceed any little cost increase if you knew about it. By the way, in K-12 schools where records have been kept, the attendance of both students and teachers goes up, and sometimes the test scores do too, if for no other reason people are there more. And if the place is clean, people psychologically feel a little better about it. But back to why this isn't done, imagine yourself in a room with a cleaning chemical salesman and a purchasing manager, and what are their incentives? The purchasing manager would like to get as much cleaning agent as he can at a reduced price to improve his purchase price variance by which he's paid. The chemical salesman wants to sell as much as possible at the best price he can get, and so they'll haggle around over that, and they'll sign a contract, and that's that.
At that point, it's not even really about the process of cleaning. It's just about product and money moving hands.
That's right. It's a very narrow view of what's involved, because neither one may be really much concerned or aware of the effects of cleaning on their people or on their buildings.
Well, what are some of the big examples of scientific cleaning put into practice? Like, we can start with, how do they manage things like waste?
If you're using the right amount of cleaning agent, you probably are going to reduce the amount of water used by 40-50%. You reduce the total number of cleaners that, your total stock of cleaning agents decreases. You have only one set of equipment like vacuum cleaners. And by the way, you want to pick a vacuum cleaner that has a very high filtration retention, meaning that most of the dirt you suck up stays in the bag. It doesn't blow back out in the air. Some of them, the really poor ones, you can pick up dirt off the floor and you blew at least half of it back into the air. That doesn't do you much good. And the precept is to get the unwanted material out of the building. Literally don't sweep it under the rug or take a string mop and just swish it around. get it out of the building. And so instead of string mops, they will use a microfiber mop today because the stuff adheres to it. And then you don't rinse out your mop in dirty water. You rinse out, you think about it as common sense things. And it's a whole series of common sense things that are actually practiced. And you certainly do not need to be some kind of a genius to do it. The genius part is when you think there's an epidemic going through a building and the janitors are wiping surfaces and so on to try to prevent the transmission of pathogens by contact or in the air as much as they can. Those things happen, and when they do happen, a janitor that understands why it's happening and what's happening are going to give you a performance you couldn't write in some kind of a job description.
Mm-hmm. So let's say that scientific cleaning was adopted globally and it becomes the standard. What do you think the impact would be on society?
Health would improve because that's the big thing. And so one last problem to get agitated about, the impact commercially is already being felt because even the big cleaning companies, the Procters and Gambles of the world, will now not sell you ready-to-use cleaner. They sell you a concentrate, and you got to mix it. And some of them, they make it a little confusing on how to mix it because the prevailing idea is surely the world is better off if we sell more cleaner than less of it.
Well, they're certainly better off.
Yeah, or they think they are.
Well, shifting topics to public health, scientific cleaning isn't very popular right now, and current methods of cleaning, the way we approach it currently, are inefficient. So how does this inefficiency harm a community?
Oh, well, the first thing you can probably see if you go to a sewage plant is all the wipes and the foam and the crud from the cleaning agents that have been poured down sinks or, flushed down toilets. And so if you really had scientific cleaning, I'm just speculating, the cost of operating sewage plants would certainly go down. And by the way, sewage plants collectively use about 4% of all the electricity generated in the United States, mostly to aerate and to separate stuff. And, I guess we can chuckle and say it really is a messy process because you're trying to take all the crud that comes from the built environment and refine most of that to where all you have is gray water that you can put back in a river. And so the crud that's left has got to go someplace. Landfill, here we come.
You're not really cleaning up the mess, you're just kind of relocating it at that point.
Oh, yes. I've sometimes referred to the house as just sort of a temporary stop for temporary use of material that originates in the ground in some place and gets transformed, and then it leaves the place and it winds up parked in a landfill. And part of trying to go from that to a better kind of economy would include much better kinds of cleaning. Cleaners see things that other people don't. And that's an important part of it because if they or somebody does something about the little problems they see, they're much more likely not to become big problems. And I used to do that going to factories, and, maybe not the first stop, but a very early one was go look at scrap bins. They can tell me how their quality is, but the scrap bin doesn't lie. And so if you're using a lot of junk or you're making a lot of junk, it's going to show.
Ideally, what would we be doing with it?
You'd be recycling it. You would be maybe reusing it. You'd be acquiring a lot less of it. So a part of cleaning is having less stuff to clean, taking better care of it. And a building that has been cleaned well and otherwise maintained well is going to serve better and last longer. And all of that is a move in the direction of living well while using a lot less.
Looking at the public spaces we have today, in just terms of sheer size and space, it's not as efficient as how they approach things in Japan, for example. How does like a reduction in the total space that we're trying to clean benefit us?
Well, you use a lot less stuff to clean, for one thing. And so, I know we were talking about the difference between a Japanese house and an American one, and a Japanese would have so little space that they are motivated that what they do buy make it really good, and then have a lot of pick up and put away or things, like you don't sleep in a bed, you sleep at a tatami on the floor, and you roll it up and hang it on the wall, and even the table and maybe a desk would be kind of like a fold-up ironing board here. You pull it down, you do your thing, you put it back up on the wall. And so all these things begin with the design, and design for cleaning can be important. If you begin to have more smart buildings and smart houses, then cleaning all those sensors and, other electronic gizmos, maybe you just don't want somebody totally untrained messing with it, because they'd either mess it up or maybe they can get hurt. And so where can you take this? Well, thinking about the use life and the afterlife of the building and the product is very important. Now, one of the better buildings to be cleaned that I've ever seen was a Seikisui house that's built by Japanese. A Seikisui house is designed to last for at least 60 years and then be recycled, and the company has developed to the point where if they take down their own house, even after 60 years, they should be able to recycle 70% of it. That's much better than anything we have today, where if you just look around, you got some old house, what do? Bulldoze the thing and haul it all off to landfill and probably don't recover very much of it.
Switching gears for a moment, we've mostly been talking about public health, but how can an individual approach cleaning differently in their own house?
Well, we already talked about the basic principles. You can adopt them somewhat for your own cleaning. Look for the top-rated stuff is Green Seal. And so Green Seal does wet tests. They don't just eyeball the formula and say that's okay. Green Seal is a certification outfit. It's about 25, 30 years old now, that literally does put all of those agents through wet chemistry tests, and they will certify, yes, this agent does what it says it will do, and it doesn't cause any harm or causes minimal harm to the environment doing it. Now, Green Seal is hard to find at retail, but if you can, find it. And don't trust just somebody putting on the package that this is environmentally something or other. It may or may not be. Anybody can put that on a package.
We're nearing the end of this, Doc. Do you have any final words before we sign off?
Well, maybe we can emphasize why clean so much space, because if you don't need to use all the space you currently occupy to do what you're doing, maybe you can rethink that. One way to decrease the total amount of cleaning is you just seal off a part of a building that you really don't need to use. And, of course, you got to clean in there some, but you don't need to maintain it in the same way as you do where people are active.
And that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed listening to this, please feel free to join us in our weekly teleconferences where we discuss the problems you and your community are facing while trying to think of possible solutions. The problems we're up against are way too large for any one person to tackle on their own. It takes all of us coming together. These dialogue sessions happen every Tuesday. You can participate by calling the number provided on our webpage. Times, topics, and the number to call are all found under the Compression Thinking Series tab on our website, www.compression.org. Also, please do not forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If we're going to make a dent in some of the issues we discussed today, it will take all of us coming together, and your support helps. I know it feels as if we've merely scratched the surface of this topic, so if you're interested in learning more, you can check out Doc's many papers, videos, and book reviews at the same website, www.compression.org. Thanks for listening, everyone.